What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
Look, you're going completely sideways, man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dave on NBC.
Jack Mary's Tack Theratrix.
Hi, I'm Spartacus.
Jackson, Sacramento, he, him.
Steven Seagal.
Sex offender guy.
I'm Keith Morris.
This is Mumbai Gudafi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
We cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Learning about Cuba, having some food.
Let's talk about Chinese people.
Have you ever been in a Turkish prison? Swangles and Fort Lauderdale.
I have sent 6 of my Libyan missiles to blow up the Sears hardware department.
Nothing could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with 2 German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you?
Thank you, comrade.
And now, Macroaggressions.
That's what assholes call it.
With your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat?
You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault. He was a retard. I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you're watching us on Iconic or you're listening wherever podcasts are served, we certainly do appreciate your support. We know you've got a lot of options out there. So thanks for checking us out. We couldn't do the show without the amazing support of our sponsors, Patriot Supply. I mean, listen, if 2020 isn't the advertisement for stocking up and being prepared, I don't know what is. I mean, if you're not getting ready to prepare yourself for what's coming in the second half of 2020, then frankly, you need to have your head examined. My Patriot Supply has done a great partnership with us. You can go to preparewithmacroaggressions.com, and they will, if you go through that link, that portal, you get $100 off a 4-week supply of food. They have emergency survival food. They have long-term, short-term. They have survival items, camping gear, cooking, power, lighting, water filtration. They have all kinds of things. You've got to start thinking about preparing yourself for what's coming. You can go to the grocery store and stock up on all that food, and I suggest you do that as well. But please keep us in mind. Go ahead and take a look at what My Patriot Supply has to offer. They have amazing things. Your family will appreciate it when everything goes down and there's food lines and insanity and who knows what's coming with our election. So get yourself prepared in advance. Prepare with macroaggressions.com, $100 off for a 4-week supply. Well, if there's somebody that knows a thing or two about the insanity of 2020, it's my friend Don Jeffries. He is the host of I Protest on Truth Frequency Radio on Fridays at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. He's also the author of many, many books, including Bullyocracy. And I've appeared on his radio show, and it is his first time on our show. I'm really excited. You will love Don Jeffries as much as I do. He's one of the few people in this world that is as critical of the police as I am, and I respect him for that. So, Don, how you doing? What's going on?
How you doing, Charlie? Thanks for having me. One small correction. I Protest is 5 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, it's 5 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah,
okay.
5 to 7 Eastern, so.
All right. Well, good to know. It's a great show. You get into the type of topics that we like to talk about, that I talk about on my show, that Billy Ray and I talk about from time to time, and Kev Baker, and what is going on. Although you have a little bit more of a front row seat. Being in the Washington, D.C. metro area, you have been able to witness this. Now, we all kind of see what's going on in Washington from the outsides. But for somebody that's really there on the insides, figuring it all out and watching what's happening, it must be, magnified even more. We've recently had Weekend at Bernie, presidential candidate Joe Biden decide that his best path to the Oval Office is with Kamala Harris, a reprehensible scumbag of a person, if I do say so myself. You want to talk about somebody that has done more to incarcerate minority communities, Kamala Harris has led the charge, while with her big smiley face pretending that it's not. What are they trying to accomplish here? I mean, the Democrats have been, the left in general has been saying, tear down the police, abolish the police, defund the police. And then you run a vice presidential candidate that is a cop. There's a former, what are they thinking? Are they trying to lose?
Well, it looks like it. I think these things are rigged, but if you just look at it from a political standpoint, she also offers nothing for the ticket because she comes from California, which virtually anybody saying they're a Democrat is going to win California. Mm-hmm. So that's not in play. There's zero chance of them not winning California. So typically in the past, what they would do is when JFK was pretty much forced to take LBJ as his running mate, he needed help in the South. So that's a lot of times, even though the person ran against you in the primaries as your opponent, you do that for strategic reasons. So you can try to shore up electoral votes where you're weak. But in Biden's case, he obviously isn't doing that with Kamala Harris, and he also is not playing to the woke left either with this, because her record, as you noted, as the Attorney General is horrible. And from my world, I know of her record with the RFK assassination and blocking Sirhan Sirhan's attempt to get a new trial. And I wrote an article for American Free Press about that has her horrible quotes on the record where, she's basically saying, even if there was a second shooter, it doesn't matter. So, I mean, this is and not to mention she's just reprehensible morally. I mean, all these people are. But it's just out there on the record that she slept with this odious Willie Brown. Yeah. Back, who, again, one of the more overt, although, he's kind of like Marion Barry, the mayor we had in D.C. There's almost a rogue charm about him because he's so obvious and so blunt and so corrupt, but it's nothing hidden about it. So yeah. you see, what you see is what you get there. So he basically came out and talked about how, I helped her career. She slept with me. I mean, he basically said that. So, the fact that that's out there on the record, that doesn't speak well to her character. And I can't think of a single issue where I would say she's right. And certainly the person that I liked out of all the Democrats, Tulsi Gabbard, just tore her to shreds in an early debate and destroyed her candidacy when she rightfully pointed out her woeful record as Attorney General. And she's just like Biden is. She's pro-war. I mean, she's going to go for any war there is. I mean, Trump is a peace candidate compared to these people, and that's the thing that we need to sit there and consider. So, how bad does it have to get? But she will spout the virtue signaling talking points, just like Biden will when he knows where he is. And again, you're left with a horrible choice where it's pretty hard not to find someone that you think could effectively challenge Trump, but I don't think they had two good candidates in mind that were decent candidates. Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang I thought was interesting too. Neither one of them was given a chance. So this is what you get. You get, a career guy who is, at this point, when I see Biden trotted out there, I'm basically saying it's almost elder abuse because he clearly has something going on mentally as far as he's getting dementia or something. And I don't think it's wrong to say that. It's obvious. It's out there. And he's at that age where he's like 77, 78 or something. So he could easily be having that. But no one seems to care. And it really, it's almost like he's being exploited. He's put out there and he doesn't know where he is. It's kind of cruel, really, if you think about it. So I still have expected, but again, I gave up predicting things, Charlie, when Trump was elected because I never saw that happening. I said, I'm not going to make any more political predictions because I certainly didn't see this happening. I don't know what's going to happen. Whether they're going to, use this awful ticket to put Trump back in after seeming to hate him so much, I don't know. If they want to put the final nail in and have the streets completely on fire, because the people with Trump derangement syndrome are not going to, they're not going to go away peacefully if he gets reelected. First of all, they're not going to accept it. They're going to cry Russia, Russia, Russia again, and the protests you see are going to get way bigger. And I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to launch something like forcibly remove him from the White House, which they said a couple times. They basically alluded to a military coup. So And I still think there's a good chance. That's what I thought. If I was predicting things, I would say that Biden will not be the candidate, that he'll back out for those reasons that I mentioned, or they'll claim he caught COVID or something, and they'll put Hillary Clinton or Michelle Obama or Andrew Cuomo in. So I think those would be their three top choices. But I don't know. It looks, it's going down to the wire, and it looks like they're going to go with this guy. But I don't see how they can have him even debate, because he literally. I mean, not that Trump will have a hard time tripping anybody up because he's got his own issues, but at least he appears to know where he is. He just has this cartoonish ego that's probably, I think, scripted. But I don't see how. I think you could make just on his own. Joe Biden will probably make some kind of, he does it every time he speaks now. He forgets where he is and mistakes his wife for his sister, makes some kind of racist comment, and somehow it's just forgiven, which he seems to do all the time now. Right. And so I don't know. It's never fails to be interesting, but it's just a shame that, as usual, we have nobody to vote for.
Yeah, they hope to energize the left by bringing in Kamala Harris. Seriously, it was met with collective laughter.
She looks different.
Yeah, hey, look at you. I hope you kept the receipt on your recent surgeries. I mean, everything about it is weird. It's funny because Trump recently has been, sort of going to the left of Biden, with his sorts of executive orders and things like that. Yeah. It's as if they are, like you said, it's an embarrassment that we have nobody else to vote for. But it's almost as if they're setting it up in a way to make Trump look better, like the more healthy, the more sane, logical candidate. And when Donald Trump is the most logical candidate, sane and healthy, I mean, you have to really consider what you're talking about here. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm with you. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if there was some sort of shenanigans that happened and Biden is replaced at the last minute. His mental capacity is fading fast. And I'm not on the right and I'm not on the left. I'm not somebody that's just trying to attack the left because I'm on the right. I'm not. I don't like either of them. I'm just trying to be as objective as possible. And I am 100% in agreement with you that it is a form of elder abuse. I would almost feel sorry for the guy if he wasn't such a horrible person. Yeah, and all the things that he had done in 45 years in government, and the corruption with his son, and just his track record makes him, I have no empathy for him at all. But as just as observing another human being, what's being done to him, he's like one of those trained Russian bears that looks like it would rather be anywhere else. They just kind of march him out there and sit him down, and he does his show, and his show is increasingly more bizarre and disjointed, and his brain isn't working properly. And it is just baffling to me that if you're the Democratic Party, you go back to, say, 2017, you've just had the inauguration, Donald Trump has come in, people are screaming in the streets, they're freaking out, they're afraid of what's going on. The DNC had to have a meeting to say, okay, we've made some mistakes, maybe we ran Hillary and she was more unlikable than Donald Trump. What are we going to do in 2020? How are we going to fix it? They've had 4 years to get their act together, and the best they came up with is Joe Biden. A guy who's the wheels are falling off, a guy who has a problem touching and sniffing little kids' hair. And this is the guy, like, I almost feel like there's no other explanation than they're trying to lose. There must be something because whether you like Bernie Sanders or not, there was at least enthusiasm around Bernie Sanders. Exactly. And there have been studies that have been done that show that presidential candidates that have the most energy surrounding them, whether it be positive or negative, tend to win. And it is undeniable that Trump has a ton of energy around him. I mean, not all of it is good, but he's very polarizing. People are involved and people actively care. Well, then you get to Joe Biden, everyone's like, I don't really care. What could possibly be their reasoning behind this? Because it looks like unless they're planning to cheat, which I wouldn't put it past either party, and I'm with you. No matter who wins, it'll be contested. But either they're playing real 4D chess where they're setting something up for 2024, or they're just totally incompetent. Is that?
Well, usually I used to call the Republicans the stupid party and the Democrats the evil party. So you have a choice between evil and stupid. The Republicans certainly still look stupid, and the Democrats look pretty evil most of the time. But Democrats are usually shrewd as far as politically. But this time, I don't know what they're doing. So I can't begin to tell you what they're thinking with this choice. And something happened because Biden's candidacy was dead in the water, and they clearly wanted desperately not to have Bernie Sanders again. Bernie Sanders is kind of like Trump. I don't think he's anti-establishment, but some of his rhetoric is good, like Trump's. And they play this game like they're constantly screwing him over, and they don't want him. So although he was clearly the party faithful, the grassroots favorite candidate, and you said the energy, this is where you want a candidate with that's Bernie Sanders. But they, just as they did last time when they overtly, their emails that didn't prove Russia did anything, but proved that DNC, screwed Bernie Sanders over from the get-go. It's documented there, but somehow that's been twisted into a Russia thing. But they didn't want this guy again, and he was looking good in the beginning. He was looking like the front runner. Suddenly on Super Tuesday, and Biden was dead in the water. Ironically, Kamala Harris is the one who went nuts calling him a racist for supporting busing and everything, and her before she was destroyed by Tulsi Gabbard in another debate. But she went after him, and it looked to me like it was going to be Bernie Sanders, and they were going to have to figure out which establishment candidate. But they wanted Kamala Harris early on, but Tulsi Gabbard destroyed her. And then they liked this guy, Beto O'Rourke. They were building him up to begin with, another awful candidate. And then you had the Amy Klobuchar, who's the most unexciting candidate I've ever seen.
Totally.
I talk about no energy, but they were trying to build her up for a while too. So I didn't see. And then Super Tuesday, suddenly Biden starts winning everything. And then I think they claimed he won Minnesota and Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Now, you mean to tell me that he beat by far the most left-wing candidate in the two most liberal states? I didn't accept at the time. And that's what I'm saying. There's no way there wasn't electoral fraud there. Absolutely impossible, especially when you have the support for good or bad that Bernie Sanders has. They call them Bernie bots and all that, but Bernie bros, but they're out there, and they really love this guy. And he's the only one of their candidates that had, other than Tulsi Gabbard. I went to a Tulsi Gabbard campaign rally, and I don't know if you saw that. I got to ask her a question, and it was filmed. The guy filmed, my friend filmed it, and it went a little viral. Jonathan Morley, who wrote for the Washington Post, a JFK guy, he wrote an article about it in Counterpunch and quoted me and everything. And I just asked her because she was reading JFK and the Unspeakable, and she was photographed carrying it around with her. And as a JFK guy, I'm saying, wow, and you could tell she was awkward. She didn't expect it, but she did begrudgingly admit, the book, she thought the book was right. Basically, there was a conspiracy to kill JFK, which probably ended her what little chance she had right there. But, and then I got a picture I gave her a copy of Survival of the Richest, and got a nice picture of me standing there grinning like a Cheshire cat with her holding the book. But her campaign rally was very enthusiastic, very crowded. Yep. She had a lot of grassroots support, but they kept claiming she was 1% or less in the polls, ignoring her. So the candidates that were exciting, like a Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard ticket could have been exciting. Mm-hmm. But, and Andrew Yang's another guy. I didn't agree with a lot of his ideas, but he was outside the box.
Yeah.
He had interesting things to say. He certainly should fit the envelope for diversity. I mean, he's an Asian. I guess that doesn't matter. I don't know what they're looking for, but instead they settled on the oldest white guy and a candidate who was very Barack Obama-like. Kamala Harris is really not an African American in any way, shape, or form. Her father's from Jamaica, and her mother is from a very upper class Indian part of India, a caste society. So she doesn't come from the hood anywhere, and she has no American black in her whatsoever. So other than her association, I guess, is the mistress of Willie Brown. That's about as close as she comes to it. But the idea, but that was Barack Obama's case. This is a guy who was raised exclusively by white people. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was the whitest black guy you ever saw, and he was only half black to begin with, but he was marketed as, this cool guy who played basketball. So I think there's a lot of that in her, but most importantly, like Obama, she'll go along with the wars. She'll crack down on law and order when it suits her purpose. You're not going to see her. And none of these, you talk about the police, and none of these, and ironically, we have these protests, and I keep posting every day, more evidence of racism. Like I found one today of a white officer kicking a white girl in her head while she was handcuffed on the sidewalk. These kinds of things. There was a white gamer that was shot dead last week or something because he was making too much noise playing games, and the cops came and shot him, killed him. And again, I said, more racism, because I'm trying to say, this is the problem is police are out of control. It's policing for profit, but it has nothing to do with racism. I could post these videos of white people being killed by them every day. That doesn't mean they're after white people. They're just out of control. They're doing it to everybody. But when you put the focus on racism, and Kamala Harris will play that game too. She'll talk, as she did with Joe Biden, calling him a racist because he worked, whatever he is, he's certainly not a racist. He worked with segregationist senators because he entered the Senate so long ago. There were plenty of them still there.
Right.
So and they were in the Democratic Party. What was he supposed to do as a young senator? So, I don't want to defend him, but this is how crazy the woke left is, and now he's their candidate. So, you think you can't get any worse. Certainly Hillary, I don't know what is worse. Somebody really evil, the queen of corruption like Hillary Clinton, or somebody who really might not know where he is. He's kind of Mr. Magoo walking around. And Joe Biden, I don't know. I think Biden's probably less harmful than Hillary Clinton would be, but it's certainly a pathetic choice, and it's not a good look for, especially when the protests and I don't think there should be a non-white candidate just because of that. But when you have these protests all over, Black Lives Matter, all this stuff, and then you basically have two old white guys who are not very articulate,
right,
that are going to be fighting it out again. And it can't leave you too inspired, but I can't pretend to know what they're going to do. I'm sure they already know who's going to be the president. They've already selected him.
Yeah. Nothing says we're getting rid of racism like pre-announcing that you're going to pick a VP candidate who you're just looking for one that's a woman and that's black.
Yeah, exactly.
Congratulations, Kamala Harris. You've been chosen not because of your qualifications, but because you look the part, because you're playing a role. You're playing a role as this person. Because if we were to look at her qualifications in California and what she's done, she made no effort to take care of the exploding prison population inside California. I'm a Californian. I don't live there now anymore, but I grew up there and lived there for 30 plus years. The prison system is out of control. Triple bunks in the gyms, because they've run out of rooms. You've got the opportunity, you've got marijuana laws that she cracked down on. She didn't have a problem with the death penalty. She was going hard in the paint for that. She's the worst possible candidate for the black community, yet the black community is going to get lied to and told that she's somehow on their side because she kind of looks a little bit more like them than the other people. This is exactly insulting to the black community. They think that they're so stupid that they'll just say, "Oh, well, listen, she's a black woman. Let's vote for her." Never mind the fact that, if you want to examine her record and Joe Biden's with the horrifying omnibus crime bill that Bill Clinton put into play in the mid 90s, that created the demand for the private prison system. And if you read Catherine Austin Fitz's work about how the private prison system began, it talks about how it was controlled through Washington, D.C. and lobbyists and law firms there, how they got together and they made the decisions that the private prison industry was going to be this new growth economy and that they were going to use this bill to make sure that the facilities were filled with people. And this is horrifying. It just baffles me that we're in the middle of a situation where we still have riots and protesting and all that stuff. We still have Black Lives Matter everywhere, including on the NBA court and on the back of their jerseys and all these things. We've got Black Lives Matter and all of this push towards that. And yet you're going to bring in a candidate that has put more black lives in prison, two candidates, and Biden and Kamala Harris, that put more black people in prison than anybody else, excluding maybe Bill Clinton. But this is this seems like insanity to me, but insanity and the DNC seem to go hand in hand. And what I'm worried about now is we can already see the setup. We're a couple months out from this election. We're starting to hear about mail-in ballots. Yes. What do you know about mail-in ballots? How can this be? This seems like something that on the surface could be a convenience, but once you dig just even a centimeter deep, you realize that it is rife for exploitation by both sides, really. And that no matter who wins, the other side will point to that. They'll just say, you cheated, you rigged it. Caitlin Johnstone had a great article that just came out that said, if Trump wins, the left will accuse Russia of putting him in. If Biden wins, then the right will accuse China of putting him in.
Right, exactly. Yes.
So where are we going? Mail-in ballots. Is this the DNC's plan?
Well, it certainly looks like they're pushing them really, really hard, and I think it's the Trump factor where, and I said this, I think he was selected to, and I still believe that he can't be real. I think, but maybe he is. Maybe they just knew this guy was this ridiculous, and he really does have this ego, and he really does insult people at like a 12-year-old level. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe this is certainly some part of his personality, but I think he was selected to be a lightning rod and to get that left-right paradigm back where they want it. And that is to get everybody in one camp or the other. Two of these, as my boy Huey Long, 90 years ago, called them the Twin Towers of Disaster, High Papa Lom and Low Papa Chaim, Tweedledum and Tweedledee. There is no choice. And they're looking at the mail-in ballots are part of a win-at-all-costs mentality, especially those with Trump deranged syndrome. I mean, I've lost so many people, friends that were that wrote glowing reviews of Hidden History, especially, and who had me on their talk shows, and thought I was the greatest thing since sliced bread. But because I'm a Trump agnostic. I don't love or hate him at all. I still, and his enemies are so bad, it's hard not to keep sympathizing with him. Yeah. Because no matter how ridiculous he is, they always look worse. And so it comes across as being perceived as support for Trump. And I'm not supporting him. I'm very critical of him. But they believe I am because I'm not jumping on this Trump derangement syndrome banner. I'm not suddenly thinking George W. Bush and Mitt Romney are really cool because they're going against me. And that's what they're doing. I'm not, sitting there and posting pictures of Barack Obama and saying, remember when we had class and elegance? And, it's like, what are you talking about? It's like, and I said, if only we could go back to the pre-2016 America, which I wrote about in Hidden History and you all loved, which was nothing but nonstop corruption. So you're acting as if Trump is suddenly, and really Trump, the big secret about Trump is that he doesn't do anything much wrong because he doesn't do much of anything. He just tweets. Right. His presidency has been a tweeting presidency. He's a tweeter in chief. And that's all he does. He makes threats and says he's going to do something, which he doesn't do. He usually flip-flops. The few things he has done are pretty much neocon Republican stuff when he does something. And so you would not get this hostility towards a President George Bush or a Jeb Bush that you have now if he had won the presidency, but it's because of his personality. They hate his personality, and it's like the Orwell character Goldstein in 1984, where he had the 2 minutes hate, where the party members would go to an assembly and they'd play Goldstein's speeches and show his face, and they would scream and go wild and throw things at the screen for 2 minutes to get it out of their system. But with Trump, it's a 24/7 hate. Yeah. And whenever they see his face or hear his words, they go ballistic. And it's so many good people who have lost their reason over him. It's a real thing, Trump derangement syndrome. Now, of course, conversely, there's what I call Trump enablement syndrome on the other side. And this is the Q crowd, the cult, that ignores everything he's done, which is to deport fewer illegals than Barack Obama did. And really hasn't done much of anything except talk. And, even though he told them on his first day in office, Hillary was good people and we're going to leave them alone, they're still chanting lock her up at the rallies and when he has rallies. And they respond to his red meat that he throws out at them, even though his record is not that. I mean, his record is one of really doing nothing. Of course, he's been under assault. I understand that, the ridiculous fake, and I wrote enough articles about that for American Free Press. yes, those things are, I understand he's been under assault, but he also keeps appointing one horrible deep state creature after another, including William Barr, who, we're supposed to believe that William Barr, who is a deep state Hall of Famer, is going to drain the swamp? I mean, really? This is a guy who was a character witness for FBI sharpshooter Lon Horiuchi, who blew Vicky Weaver's head off as she held her baby at Ruby Ridge? Whoa. This guy? And but, this is what we're expected to believe. And so you have those two sides. And when somebody like me tries to point out, when Trump does something good, like when he held a summit with Vladimir Putin early on and talked about peace, I thought that was great. I got a lot of attention for what I wrote about it, but I caught a lot of flack too. And, when I criticize, I've been on most of the shows I go on, the big shows I go on are almost all really pro-Trump and pro-Q. So I have to kind of, but I'm never unfair to Trump, but I can say things like, as innocuous as saying, I think Trump's essentially a lame duck president at this point. And I'll, it might get a couple thousand comments on YouTube, and 90% of them will be taking me to task for saying, what do you mean he's a lame duck president? I mean, you can't win. And so I'm just trying to point out that whatever you look at his policies, which haven't been much, he's had a disastrous impact on the country as far as dividing the country because of his personality. And most importantly, he's killed any chance of an independent political movement because everyone is tied into this left. Everyone hates him is going to vote for no matter who. I've said if they could resurrect Hitler, I think they would vote for Hitler over Trump. That's how much they hate him. They hate him with a hostility we've never seen. Of course, the other side, it doesn't matter what he does. Orange man bad, they come out, 350 and those stupid memes they have online. And so you can't win. You try to talk reasonably and look at it independently, and it does not compute. But if Hillary Clinton had been elected, we would ironically probably maybe finally had a growing independent movement, maybe, because we would have been a response to her. But not with Trump, because so many people, 40% or so, have coalesced behind him. And I understand they're in opposition because the left at this point is crazy. When you're seeing what's happening in the streets, they're burning things down, tearing down statues. They're virtue signaling over nothing. You have tons and tons of crazy white people out there saying white privilege and I hate whites when they're white. I mean, when you make of that, I mean, it's like, how do you reason with that? It's impossible.
It's the weirdest time ever because, I don't love Trump either, but I'm talking about pre-presidency. I just don't like that personality type. The type of guy that says, I'm great and everything's great and I'm the best and everything's the best. Look at my casino. I lived in Vegas and worked in real estate. Look at Trump, the condos in Trump. They're the best in town. They're not the best in town. I've sold condos. I mean, they're just not. It's like it's a solid B, but everything isn't the greatest. So, but if I criticize him like you, oh my God, look for the comments because the comments are like, Trump hasn't done any of those things. And if I say, I don't like Trump, I think he's, but the left is so blinded with rage and they're not being strategic about this because if they were, all they would have to do is tone down the insanity if possible, which I don't think is possible for them at this point. But if they had just toned down the insanity on their side and let Trump continue to be this polarizing lightning rod of saying all kinds of unbelievable things and being an embarrassment on the international scene politically with the way he treats other people, then they would cruise to victory this time around. But they just can't help themselves. They have to act extra crazy. They have to say things like defund all the police and the riots are fine. And yeah, you got to wear your mask for coronavirus, but it's fine. The governors of the states saying, yeah, it's fine if you're protesting and everything. Like, do they not have a mirror? Do they not see how ridiculous they look? Like, I find myself, much like you do, in an unenviable position of defending Trump. Yeah. And I don't want to defend him because I don't like him. But like their attacks are so off base on some of the things that I find myself saying, hang on a second. Yeah. We've got legitimate criticisms of Trump and the way he is and the things he does and what he says and who he puts in positions. But you guys have turned this into something else. Like, you're making up stuff about a guy that you don't need to make up things about. You don't need to lie about Trump. Trump will do all these horrible things on his own. He'll act in certain ways that make him unlikable, and he'll say things and do things. Like, you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot by trying to create. I don't know. It's been weird to watch it, because the left, the tolerant left, has come completely unhinged. Yes. And the media, my least favorite portion of this whole, environment that we live in, is the mainstream corporate media. The independent media is fantastic. Been doing the best they can with what limited resources they have in the alternative media, the limited exposure, the constant, deplatforming and shadow banning and all this stuff. The fact that there is an alternative media at this point still is amazing to me. But the mainstream media, man, I'll tell you what. If we had a Nuremberg-style type of trial after this whole thing, the head of those media corporations and those anchors that go on, those soulless robot anchors that go on every night and blatantly lie to people, man, they should be put on trial for crimes against humanity. They are co-conspirators in this whole coronavirus situation.
Well, look at the guy. Was it CBS or NBC that had a medical correspondent that pretended he had coronavirus for months?
It was I think it was NBC.
Yeah, and then they said, matter of factly admitted, he tested negative. Well, wait a minute. I mean, so he knew the entire. Are you talking about? I mean, I don't believe in hate crimes, but that really, if there is such a thing, that is a crime, because you're misleading. You're not. It's one thing with fear porn, but here you have an alleged doctor and a media guy, both the worst of both worlds, and he's going in there pretending he has something, even worse than Chris Cuomo. Faking that he's, quarantining in the basement when he's caught out, bullying some biker that was walking by and saying, "How come you're not with social distancing and wearing your mask?" But this is reprehensible. So yeah, you're right. But this is where we're getting the information from, and that's why when you assess politics in the light of what's going on with this crazy pandemic or whatever you call it, where there doesn't appear to be any end in sight for this lockdown, and the fact that nobody's talking about the economic repercussions, which are unimaginable at this point. They're just this month. Now, everything about Trump, it's impossible to tell if it's real or not, but supposedly he signed executive orders a few days ago that sounded pretty great. Now, I don't know. I can't believe he actually did it, because typically he will say he'll do something, then you find out he actually didn't do it. That's right. Been his modus operandi so far. But if he signed the executive order putting off, if he could do that, even staving off the evictions, because they're talking about 40 million people could be evicted this month because of this COVID stuff, and that's what the numbers have been in the mainstream media. So this is a problem that's almost impossible to comprehend. And this is all because of this ridiculous shutdown that, again, the people that, and because of Trump is in the middle of this too, because they've managed to politicize whatever this thing is and make it so that everybody, I mean, you can pretty much assess as you're walking around outside, whoever is walking around with those masks everywhere and giving you dirty looks if you don't have one, and social distancing if you get too close to them, you can rest assured 99.9% of those people are voting against Trump. They hate Trump. And the ones that are kind of renegades and say, I'm not going to wear a mask and stuff, those are the ones they're going to vote for Trump. Now, I don't know why, because Trump has, gone along with everything that crazy Dr. Fauci and these people have said. He's in one of his more characteristic moves. He made a big production, and his people bragged about he got us out of the World Health Organization. Good thing. They're corrupt. They lied. They lied about the swine flu in 2000. They've been lying about this too. So is the CDC. But literally in the next breath, he makes a speech supporting Gavi, which is a Bill Gates organization that makes all the vaccines and stuff. So did he really do anything? No. And so it's a mess. And with all this going on, I don't know. And that's what we brought up. I wandered off, as I tend to do, from the mail-in ballots question. But the reason they're able to bring that up, of course, is because, it's too dangerous for them to go vote in person. Now, they can protest anywhere they want, as long as it's a BLM protest. Now, Trump rally, that has an incredibly viral rate of infectiousness.
Oh, yeah.
But apparently the BLM rallies, there's no way it can spread for some reason. And it's amazing. This very strange virus this thing is. But if people attempted to go out and vote as they go to Walmart or any of the big companies that have been allowed to stay open the entire time. It's just the mom and pop businesses that had to close.
Yeah.
And were devastated. Walmart, Home Depot, no problem. Business as usual. But everybody else is standing in. Nobody questions this. And this is where's the left on that? The left should be defending small businesses.
For sure.
They're too busy unless they can prove it was racist or, somehow they offended the transgenders. They don't care. But, when you have this situation like this, this is the Democrats obviously kind of a Hail Mary to try to get as many illegals, I guess, to vote or voting dead and often through the mail process, I guess, is easier. And they want to make it as easy as possible. So, of course, they're criticizing. We've always had some mail-in votes. But the reason most people don't, nobody ever encouraged everyone to vote in by mail because, let's face it, it's not a good process. Trump is right. The post service certainly isn't perfect. They lose a lot of my mail. So, they could easily lose your vote. So, yeah. I think there's no reason in the world why we can't. But for some reason, again, just like with the virus, the Democrats appear to have broken down on us. We have to have the mail-in votes as if this is a Trump issue, that somehow there'll be more people voting mail. And I don't know why that would be. It shouldn't change the ratio, but the fact that they're saying it will indicates that they want to win at all costs because they hate this guy so much. It's like, a cheating football coach or something, a cheating coach where you just win, baby.
Yeah.
Win it all. And I think that's the mode they're in right now. They don't care how they win as long as they win. And I don't think Republicans have quite the same mindset. And again, I was always more of a Democrat than a Republican back before I became independent. But at this point, I just don't see the same level of hatred, ironically, and vitriol on the part of Republicans. If anything, they're just they're taking it, and they're just standing back and getting pummeled, and they really don't respond. But the Democrats are, social justice warriors are out there screaming and screeching and jumping up and down, and it's impossible to have a discussion with them. Everything's racist, everything's white privilege, and systemic racism that somehow gives billions, if not trillions, to Black Lives Matters and Antifa and all these organizations that are accusing him of it. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very strange institutional racism we have, and also the same kind of institutional racism that has gotten tons and tons of white people fired for merely saying all lives matters or just criticizing Black lives or criticizing the looting and the rioting.
Yeah.
So that's a very strange way for a systemically racist society to react. And when I point that out, of course, then, I'm accused of everything myself, but I do it because it just, it doesn't make any sense to me. I think that these people are corrupt, and I keep trying to channel things into a discussion of class. Mm-hmm. Yes, they hate us. They hate average people, but blacks are disproportionately poor. They hate poor people, clearly, but they don't hate black people. Otherwise somebody like Oprah with zero talent at all and obese to boot could not possibly become a billionaire. Imagine what she could have achieved if this wasn't a racist country.
Right.
Yeah. She'd be a trillionaire, I guess.
Well, it's funny to me that the media just skews everything. When you see things, it's like they take the truth, they funnel it through the media, and it comes out as it just totally backwards and disjointed. And with this coronavirus situation, had me thinking about that. Obviously I wasn't alive for the Spanish flu that was going through in the early 1900s or anything like that. But my guess is that the Spanish flu didn't need a public relations firm behind it to let everybody know that the Spanish flu was there. I feel like you kind of knew.
Yes.
People were dying. People close to you were dying. It was a bit, bodies were stacking up. You were legitimately fearful. And I don't know what the numbers were. 30% of people, died from it or that were close to it, wound up dead. It was a significant number. And not that I'm wishing this for the corona situation, but weren't we promised much higher death counts? Why do we have to have mandates telling us to put the mask on all of a sudden as the charts show that the rates are falling, the deaths are falling and all this? It seemed very suspicious to me, almost like It looks like the people are starting to forget about this. It looks like the stores are starting to open up and things are getting back to normal. I've got an idea. Let's make a visual representation of this virus in the form of masks on every. Let's mandate the masks for everybody so that when you're out in the public, it now becomes impossible for you to forget about this virus that's killing a virus, Don, that is so dangerous that you have to get tested just to see if you actually even have it. You know what I mean? With a median death age of 80 and a 99.97% survival rate. I mean, and we're what? We're walking around like we're trying to sneak around and hide from I mean, it's just not just like theater of the stupid. I mean, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, I'm starting a book on the pandemic right now, and it's the numbers are just amazing. They're everywhere, and they don't add up. And even though they've desperately been padding the totals, because for a lot in the beginning, people like me, I was early on in social media, I was all over this, and I was pointing out over and over again how the numbers were nothing compared to an average flu season. Well, they really started accelerating the numbers, I guess, right before summer began. And so we've seen the numbers exploding. But again, we know what they're doing now. We know from the directives to hospitals that I published online when it first came out, I think in March or April, where the CDC very specifically told hospitals, directed all hospitals, you will list the cause of death as COVID, even if, and I quote, tests are inconclusive or unavailable.
Wow, that's scientific.
I mean, so it's like, what? And if you look at the CDC sends out a press release every week with updated figures. Now the figures ebb and flow. They'll just cavalierly, lose 20,000 and then bring it back the next week. They're all over the place. And of course, nobody's analyzing this except people like me. It's kind of like when, looking at the Warren Commission's actual evidence. They didn't think that people or citizens are going to go examine this and say, wait a minute, that doesn't support what you said. But if you look at it, they have a disclaimer in all those weekly updates, an asterisk. And it says, just what John Rappaport told me on an early on in this pandemic, I had him on the show. And he told me at that time, and the CDC verifies, that presumptive cases are included in the totals. And they say that themselves. This is their disclaimer. So that means they're presumed. That means they're unproven. So we have no idea how many, and so many people, we have anecdotal evidence from people on Twitter that said, no, grandpa did not die of this. They reported, no, he did not. He had pneumonia or whatever. We see it all the time. Singer John Prine, one of my favorites, was reported to have died of COVID. I did a little bit of digging. No, he first of all, he had cancer and all kinds of other serious issues for years. He's a very sick guy. He was, if you look at the report, he was rushed to the hospital with COVID-like symptoms. And that COVID-like symptoms we hear from the celebrities like Greta Thunberg and J.K. Rowling, people that never were tested, but they had all the symptoms. So they just, because it's a virtue signaling thing, it's cool. I had COVID. And so that's what, and so all these people started doing that. And no, you were not tested for anything like that. And, lost in the shuffle is the early data, which I'll be stressing in this book, that, Italy came out and said 99% of the deaths that you all were trumpeting to the skies were from what they called other pathologies. Mm. They weren't from COVID. So, and then you have things like John Rappaport published early on from a newspaper in China that just matter-of-factly admitted that they were lumping in when they were putting out those dire totals, and China was, oh my God, what's coming out of China, this incredible virus. They were matter-of-factly lumping in pneumonia patients and pneumonia deaths with it. So it's completely unreliable what they're reporting. So we don't know what they're doing now. We know there's an 80% false positive rate. We have over and over again from the UK and the United States, both recently, that have had to take 10,000 deaths off here or there, cases off. They're constantly playing with the numbers because they're rigged. They're not even remotely accurate. And the idea is just to get them as high as possible to make it look like this was the greatest scourge since the 1918 flu. And as you said, in 1918, people knew what was going on. They knew people who were sick. In this case, when you're walking around, there doesn't seem, and this is why they had to scrub all the empty hospital videos that Jason Goodman and others took early on, when I was researching this book, I tried to go to YouTube. All the empty hospital videos are gone.
Wow, and, I didn't realize that. I mean, I watched them all. I know Jason. I've talked to him about it. About the hospitals. I said, "What did I'm texting with Jason. I'm just watching your hospital video. Where are all the people?" He said, "They're not there."
Well, I think that the reason they got rid of those is because they had a Sandy Hookish air to them.
Oh.
And I think that's why, because there's still a lot of the others, many of the controversial videos. I mean, Judy Mikovich's The Great Plandemic was taken down right away, things like that. But there's still some pretty controversial things you can see out there that they have been taken down. But anything that indicated they were lying about what was going on at the hospitals, I think they still have the dancing nurses videos, which are also indicative of something not kosher going on. Very bizarre. I mean, they look like they won the lottery, and they're the choreographed dance numbers. I don't know what's going on. Real patients apparently there, or dummies. I don't know which would be worse. But these things are real, and the empty hospital videos were crucial because at the same time, and I actually wrote to I can't think of her name now, Dr. Smith. I forget what her first name was. She was a specialist in medical simulation. Now, you talk about conjuring up Truman Show, Sandy Hook type ideas. Right. What does that mean? I've never heard of it before. But she took a video that was published in the New York Times. They did a story about it, where she was talking about this the overcrowded conditions and they were being overwhelmed with COVID patients in one of the New York hospitals, and they didn't have enough medical equipment. It was blaming it on Trump, of course, Yeah. And so at that same day that she took that video, Jason Goodman and all these other people was outside that hospital, and it was crickets. All the EMT, all the ambulances are there. The EMT people were bored, and when they tried, you saw when he tried to interview them, they kind of chuckle when he mentioned it. Not wearing masks, whatever was going on at all those hospitals. I don't know what a pandemic's supposed to look like, but it didn't look like that. So I think it's important to consider, how much are we being, as always, manipulated, and what's real? I don't know. Something certainly people get sick all the time, but how much of this? I suspect all of it was due to pneumonia or the regular flu, and they just gave it a fancy name.
Yeah. When you had John Rappaport on, did he talk? I know he wrote a book called AIDS Incorporated back about the AIDS epidemic. Yeah. So I'm assuming he had a pretty good idea about Fauci's role in the AIDS.
Yeah.
What I haven't heard him talk about that. What did you guys get into that at all?
It's been so long. I'm not sure. I'm sure we probably touched on it a little, but I'm sure he was critical of Fauci, and certainly Fauci, as you indicated, had a role in that. And people have to remember the hysteria was nowhere near what it became with this. I mean, nothing closed down. Right. But I remember being very young when they were talking about this, and I remember Oprah, people like the typical hysteria. I remember her on one of her shows turning to the camera because there was a book written at the time that I read, and it was got a lot of criticisms, called The Myth of Heterosexual AIDS. And the guy that wrote it was shouted down because he was showing that, first of all, this is not everyone is at risk. This is isolated really to just a few groups of people that can get it: homosexuals and IV drug abusers. That's it. That's it. I mean, and you can get it innocently from transfusions from those people. Right. But the average public was not at risk at all. Well, of course, she was shouted down, and how dare you say such a thing? But he mentioned in there that Oprah had turned to the camera on one of her shows and said something, and I can't remember the outlandish figure, but it was something unbelievably stupid, like it is estimated by 1989 that 50% of America will have AIDS, or something that crazy, something that outlandish. And that's the kind of hysteria that was there at that time. And Fauci was in the center of that. And of course, in AIDS, unlike what this probably is, was a real thing. But we know, I talked a little bit about that in Hidden History, that it probably came out of Fort Detrick, Maryland. That there's a lot of indications that it was very some strange shenanigans going on there. I mean, the fact that they asked for male homosexuals to be guinea pigs for this, or male hepatitis patients, like why would you do something like that unless you were trying to give it to a particular segment of the population for some reason? And so in this case, it's a little, obviously a lot different, and it has impacted the world. But basically, Charlie, we're looking at the entire world. This is a whole worldwide thing, unprecedented. The entire world was shut down in a matter of a couple weeks. without a single troop being needed, without a single cop being needed, without a single shot being fired, as the expression goes. And it shows no signs of subsiding. I mean, if this thing were real, people should be questioning that it must be some kind of bioweapon, because viruses burn out in the heat. Mm-hmm. This is that we're told that the cases are skyrocketing in Florida and places like that. Doesn't make any sense. There's never been a virus like this in the history of the world, and they're talking about the second wave as they, I think, belatedly made up the second wave. They're belatedly making up a lot of things about that 1918 flu. I'm looking at a lot of the photos, particularly one of a baseball player in the 1918 World Series. As an old-time baseball fan, I've read those books. I've seen that picture before. There was no picture. He was not wearing a mask in that picture. That's absolutely ridiculous. So I think at least some of them, they're photoshopping these masks on. I don't think these masks were prevalent back then. I don't think there was any, social distancing. The world was different. I don't think Americans would have tolerated something. And I certainly don't think a Major League Baseball player in that era especially, I mean, they were tough guys. They would have never done something like that. But this is to try to get Americans on board to see, this is not unprecedented. We did this before. Well, no businesses were shut down. Nothing was shut down then. And they're now talking about the second wave then. Well, I've asked, okay, COVID-19 is named that because it's the coronavirus that comes around every year. And this is the 2019 strain. So shouldn't the 2020 strain be coming on this fall? How will we have a second wave of 19? Where's 20? Won't they collide? I mean, nobody asks these questions, or that we're just not going to have a 20 this year because it's still 19. It's still their show. Right. I mean, people don't ask those questions, and this has become so successful. It really shows the way America and the world have gone from maybe what centuries ago you would have been able to get the people who had religious faith and religious superstition behind the drowning of witches and burning of witches and things like that. Now there's a scientific faith. And the whole thing is we trust science. And this is all based on science and medicine and those authorities. So whatever they say goes, and they know best. And it's amazing because they're just as infallible as any religious leader was 500 years ago. Yeah. And no one seems to question. They think it's different. No, it's not different, because they're not there. First of all, the WHO and the CDC, who are running this show, they were both caught lying about the same thing in 2009. They were caught lying about, guess what, inflating the swine and lupus numbers, which is what we're pretty sure they're doing this time. Right. So CBS was caught this time with running footage that supposedly came from New York City's crowded emergency room, a crowded hospital wing. No, it turns out it was from Italy. Yep. And so they lied about that. We also had all the media with the ominous coffins coming out of Italy, the picture. No, it was from like 10 years before in another part of the world. And no, totally unrelated. So we know they're lying all the time. And I mentioned the doctor that was claiming he had it when he didn't have it. So why would I tried to stress over and over again, why would you be trusting something that is being promoted by our awful politicians, our corrupt and lying media, and the WHO and the CDC? And what's most important, Charlie, is that there's not a single leader. And this is what distresses me the most. And really, say for the protests as well, which kind of came double whammy, hit right after them. So, to wreak even more economic devastation. We can't imagine what the price tag's going to be for that eventually. All the damage they've caused. Businesses closed from that. But there's not a single leader out there, on the left or right, that has other than people like us that have internet platforms. No one is pointing out how absurd that wearing the masks are, the social distancing, this incredible authoritarian tyranny. Why you can go to Walmart but you can't go to church? Why you can why protesters can march in the streets and loot and riot, and that's cool, but you can't hold a political rally if you're Trump. I mean, and you can't go to football games, and apparently they're going to hold the NFL games if they have them. Most contact sport, lack of social distancing imaginable, but that's okay. But you can't have fans sitting in the stands because of social distancing. I mean,
it's preposterous. The whole thing is ridiculous.
Yeah.
the religion of science, that has come out now. It's as if the politicians and the media know that they're totally full of it. They've been lying to people for a long, long time. They have no credibility, but the scientists still do to a certain extent. I mean, we dig into it and we know that there's a lot of nonsense behind it, but they don't have the clout anymore, but they'll take the scientists and put them up there and say, hey, this is these people are to be trusted. One of the things that really struck me as the setup for a psychological operation was when I saw the nurses and doctors being put up on this pedestal and being treated like, it reminded me of the troops in like 2003, 2004 and all that stuff. And my feeling was like, okay, I understand why they did it back then. It was, it's hard to criticize the troops. If we focus on them, then we have to I support the troops. I don't support the war, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But with these doctors and nurses, my feeling is that they've been put on this pedestal for a specific reason, that if you elevate them to something above the rest of us, it's very hard to say no to them when the time comes to force the mandatory vaccination. And who will be issuing those vaccines? These same nurses and doctors that we put on this pedestal. So it's hard for you to say, is this shot, I don't want this shot, when you're talking to your hero who's saying the shot is fine, we're going to give it to you, I'm a nurse or I'm a doctor, I wouldn't lie to you, remember, I'm this great big hero. So it's got me feeling that there's a bit of brainwashing in the works here, that that this is a bit is planned. I go back to the 2017 comments of Fauci saying, Donald Trump and his presidency, he's going to get a pandemic, it's going to come out of nowhere. It's like, that's a very specific prediction. Yeah. And for it to be so true and to come from the guy who's going to be in charge of this whole situation, why aren't we dragging Fauci down to the police station and interrogating this guy? How do you have such, and Bill Gates for that matter too, how you guys seem to have an awful good sense of what's coming. It seems to me that maybe you guys are behind this. What's going on here? So Fauci making predictions that just happen to come true. Bill Gates running Event 201 a couple months in advance. It just happens to simulate a coronavirus outbreak that happens almost identically the way they think. We look back into the drills in the lead up to 9/11. We look up to Crimson Contagion. We look into Lockstep. If you have the eyes to see it, what you see is that drills simulating major worldwide events happen, and then a couple months later, it happens in real time, almost identical to the way they were simulated. Do we have any help, or do we have any hope of waking up humanity, or is everybody going to sleepwalk into this, into the New World Order?
Ironically, Billy Ray and I, we talked about it on Unplugged, for Iconic early on, we both were going with the mantra that they may have overplayed their hand. They may have gone too far. And I thought when they said, they canceled all sports, they closed the malls, they closed the movies, closed restaurants. I said, I think the average, the normies out there, this is beyond it. This is really impacting everyone's lives. I didn't think they would tolerate it, but unfortunately, I overestimated what resolve was out there, because they're clinging to this lockdown with a desperate fury. And you mentioned about the support and the troops, and basically, thank you for your service has now become thank the first responders. The first responders, there's so much worship for these people, however you define them. And what is saddest is that there's nobody out there criticizing the mainstream media. YouTube is removing channels, videos and channels left and right that question this. They question the WHO. They question the CDC. They're beyond question. Anything anti-vaccine is beyond the pale. There is not a single leader other than, Donald Trump's tweets. Again, I said when Donald Trump became president that as ridiculous as he is, I thought he was our last hope. I stand by that. He's our last hope, as flawed as he is, because there is no one else that has any real political power. I mean, Rand Paul's kind of a pale imitation of Ron Paul, and he said a few good things, but really nothing. There's a couple, Republicans in the Congress or that say a few things here or there, but there's no business leader. All these businesses were shut down. Where were the people whose profits matter so much? None of them were speaking out. Nobody, no journalists, no leftist politician pointing out, this is the inconsistency. Why does the mom and pop store have to close when Walmart and Home Depot, the national chains with a much bigger traffic through their stores, why can they stay open? Nobody questioned this. Why are police kneeling down and doing nothing with looting and tearing down of statues and destruction of property, but they're going and arresting people for opening up their barbershop and things like that, or opening up their gym. Nobody questions this, and this is the problem, that we don't have the any kind of leadership on our side. And Trump, as flawed as he is, his ridiculous tweets here or there, and when he kind of goes off the cuff and says it's a hoax or anything like that, then you can sense that's probably what he really believes. But that's as close as we get. Then he's slapped right back down, or this is all part of the script and this is what he's supposed to do. But there's no. How can no one be questioning this? No one's questioning the fact this is unprecedented. It's going to cause maybe 40 million evictions if we're told to believe. We don't know how many millions of people are out of work. We don't know how many. Somebody said, conservatively speaking, 100,000 small businesses will never reopen. That, I think that's very conservative.
Oh, yeah.
And not to mention the damage on businesses that are out there. Restaurants, all the restaurants that tried to remain open just for carryout. All those servers and wait, that were, obviously you didn't need them anymore. If you're just carry out, nobody, the entertainment industry, which is, they're out of business. They're out of movies, and they don't care. All television series are being, suspended. They're all on board again because of Trump. Trump's been placed in there, so they have to stay because somehow it's perceived that if we open back up, this will help Trump. I don't really know why that would be, but that's what and of course with sports. So I don't see that many irate sports fans. Grumbling here or there, but for them to cancel March Madness, and now you've already had college football is huge.
Yeah.
To the alumni and the boosters and all this stuff and the media. And for them, there's not going to be a college season. They've already had the Big Ten and one of the other big conferences cancel. They're all so they're going to cancel, and Major League Baseball is trying, but with this ridiculous testing guidelines, everyone's testing positive. Same thing's going to happen with football because once they get in contact with each other, if you test positive, then who were you in contact with? Well, the whole team.
Right.
So it's not going to be possible, and plus the idea to play without fans in the stands. Look at the revenue these teams are losing. And these are the worst parasites in the world, the people that own these teams. These are corporate welfare recipients that threaten to move the team if you don't build me a new stadium. So you mean to tell me the billions in revenue they're losing from ticket prices and overpriced concession prices? How are they being pacified? So something tells me they're obviously being, that billions are going to be funneled to them, courtesy of us, in some kind of a bailout plan. And the same kind of things that the American people are never going to get. They're going to get your $1,200 stimulus check and be happy with it. And meanwhile, we'll have trillions to corporate America and things like this. But it's just amazing that this is going on. It's unprecedented. I see no end game. I don't know what the end game is because it looks like I didn't think it would drag on this long. It looks like they're just going to continue. I think that masks are here to stay. That people seem to have a love for them, and it's changed. It's not only devastated us economically. What has it done to us socially? Yeah. Look at all the young people that can't hold hands, can't kiss, and not to mention sex. This is, and just how many people I've started writing a bit about that where they don't even know. They can't even guesstimate how many old people were lost in these already. They're already in awful homes, nursing homes, and so forth. They don't get many visits from their loved ones anyhow. There's so many lonely people in there. It's very sad that don't get many visits, if any. But once the people that were still close to the families that visited them, every weekend or something, if not more, haven't been able to do that. And they don't know how many of these old people, they said that they died of loneliness. They died because of the COVID, not of the COVID. And it's happened. They don't know how many times and how many funerals were held. That you couldn't get when your loved one died, you couldn't pay your respects to them. But meanwhile, the congressman that just died had 3 or 4 funerals, no social distancing. I wrote about that. George Floyd had 3 or 4 funerals, no social distancing. So, what does it mean? I mean, you can't. But nobody is questioning the maddening inconsistencies except people like us. And I don't know what it takes. And I tried it, and I've lost. My own niece deleted me as a friend on Facebook because of what I've written about COVID. I mean, that's how polarizing this is, and people are clinging to this thing. And I don't know why. I said early on, why do you want to believe that this deadly virus is there? I'm trying to show that good news, that there's doubt that once again our leaders are up to their usual shenanigans. And I said, why would you trust? It's like anything else. Why would you trust the same people that lie to you about everything else, but they're telling you the truth about, and you know they don't care about it, our health. No, they would love to have a pandemic. I mean, these are all eugenicists. Bill Gates gets giddy when he talks about billions. I mean, he's so excited. He's like Dr. Frankenstein. And of course, he being in the center of it tells you all need to do. Anyhow, I mean, this is a guy we're unqualified. You know, we talk about, who are you? Or somebody, well, who's Bill Gates? He's not a doctor. He's not a scientist. He stole the crappy software system that is full of viruses, ironically. But that's his only association he has with viruses. But people, again, don't. It's just really, it's unprecedented times. I can't begin to tell you where I think this is going to go because on a kind of a cynical side and just a straight political side, if Biden is elected, the Republicans joke suddenly the next day the virus will be gone, and I can see that, and don't want to question it. But I think it's more complex than that, and I think that they've established that they can shut everything down. They can get people running around in masks and staying 6 feet away from each other, staying away from their loved ones, not saying goodbye to their loved ones, not having marriages, things like that. They're closing churches, pastors, all, the few renegades, all the rest went along with it. They've established they can do this without needing any troops. They didn't need to declare martial law. Yeah. And I think that shows them they're probably very pleased that they have this kind of control. And I don't think, as Ron Paul said earlier on, once you give them this kind of power, they're never going to take it back. So I think at the very least, you're going to see maybe some kind of coded system like we did with terrorism, orange. And they may do that. This year the virus is orange level. So we have to go in lockdown again. But I don't know, man. It's really depressing. If you think about it, you say hope. I would like to have some hope, but I don't. I can't. I don't know where the hope would be because, I mean, it's shameful the way so many people, and again, people are followers. You need leaders, and we have no leaders questioning this, so most of the people won't. Yeah. The financial and social costs are impossible to quantify from this whole thing. And we'll leave it there. Don, where can people find you? Where can they buy your books? Where can they hear your radio show? Where are you? Well, I mean, I'm easy to find out there. I'm very active on Facebook. I post there a lot. Twitter, I need more followers at Don Jeffries, please, on Twitter. But as people tell me, I need to tweet more, which is true. I need, as you can tell, I tend to expound. And so I'm not a real good 140 character guy. I need to work on the sound bites thing. But certainly I would like to have more support for Twitter. YouTube, hopefully Billy Ray is going to help me put together a podcast here in the near future and just try to start doing that as well. But my YouTube channel needs subscribers. My books are everywhere. I'm promoting Bullyocracy, especially my latest book. And so I'd like people, I think it's very important. And Survival of the Richest. Those are my 2 conspiracy books, Hidden History and Crimes and Cover-Ups, do really well. I mean, they just sell much better than the other 2. Survival of the Richest, I think, is really, really important right now, especially because we're all, that 80-20 split may be more like 90-10 or something, because we're all getting, the vast majority of us are getting poorer and poorer during the course of this thing. And Bullyocracy is important because, again, the bullies are in charge and they're exerting their will on us. And, as I said about this thing, at anything, if you have a bully there, they're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they meet some resistance. And that's what's happening to us. Our leaders are pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and they're not meeting any resistance. So Hopefully we can summon up the will to try to fight back, but I don't have too much hope.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'd like to be optimistic, but I also need a reason to be optimistic. I haven't seen the people. The people haven't been giving me much hope. They seem to be falling in line, and that's a dangerous thing. That's Don Jeffries, everybody. He's the best. Check out his stuff, buy his books, support his work. Thanks, Don. We'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Charlie. My pleasure.